Hey everybody, thanks for pressing play. In this video I want to concentrate on this car here. This is the Tucson plug-in hybrid. Brian is my name. In this video I wanted to run through the differences that you're going to find on this plug-in hybrid versus the normal full hybrid version of the Tucson. Just a quick point of note for anyone that literally just wants to know which is better or which is the best way to go about things, scroll to the end. If you scroll to about a minute and a half from the end, I'll give you all the conclusions that I can make from this as to which is the better choice. But if you're interested in just seeing what the car is all about and the differences in it, stay tuned throughout. But at the end there is a conclusion. And yes, I totally understand that I look like I'm wearing a toupee at this stage because it's so long since I got my haircut, but I'm working on that. I got a plan. Anyway, so here's the thing. We have a plug-in hybrid version of the Tucson, and we also have a full hybrid version of the Tucson. So really what I want to show in this video is what is the difference between these two vehicles and the kind of, I suppose, advantages or disadvantages of either or. If you want more detailed videos on the actual specification, I have this video here, which basically gives an in-depth tour of the Comfort Plus model, the Executive model and the Executive Plus model, and it also accounts for diesel versus full hybrid too. And I also have this video here which runs through the differences between the previous model and the newer model of the Tucson we're talking about. And because I'm too stupid to figure out how you put a link on the video, the best way to find them is by literally typing my name into YouTube, Doolan, and then putting in the word Tucson and 2021. The first two videos that you're going to get up are exactly what we're talking about. This video, however, will not be specification specific. We're just concentrating on powertrains. So the first car we're looking at is going to be a two-wheel drive. It's going to be a 1.6 turbo with a 1.49 kilowatt hour battery producing 231 horsepower. That's going to be the full hybrid version. And we're going to be comparing that with the plug-in hybrid version, which is a four-wheel drive, 1.6 turbo again, but this time with a 13.8 kilowatt hour battery producing a combined 261 horsepower. Just really quickly starting off, from an aesthetics point of view, there is really no difference. You cannot tell the difference visually between the two vehicles. However, from what I can see so far, and this car has just landed with us, it appears that these plug-in hybrids all seem to come with a 19-inch wheel, which was actually only specification specific on the full hybrid version. In other words, you had to go for, if there was three models, there was like a Comfort Plus, there was an Executive and an Executive Plus. You had to go Executive Plus to get these big 19-inch wheels, whereas it looks like the entry model plug-in hybrid, which is the Comfort Plus, actually comes with the 19-inch wheels. So they're really smart. One point to note in this video, just for comparison, I am using different specification cars. As I was saying, the other videos will run through the different specs, whereas this video is really just concentrating on the difference between a plug-in hybrid versus a full hybrid. Another thing, the rear left-hand side quarter panel always has the fuel cap on a Tucson. So on this plug-in hybrid, you can see there's a fuel cap over here, and same on this full hybrid one. So normal fuel cap, takes petrol, just like a normal car, open and close and very straightforward. However, on the right-hand side, it's blank on the full hybrid, but it's got a port on the right hand side of the plug-in to allow you to plug the car in. And one thing actually, on the full hybrid, you just pop open the fuel cap without any internal release, but on the plug-in you got to release it. Nothing major, but it's a small difference between the two cars again. And I've absolutely no idea why that is. And actually one other thing as well is, if you go to what's called the Executive Plus model, you get a power tailgate, which was never an option on the full hybrid in any sort of trim, but in this plug-in hybrid it is an option as standard on the Executive Plus model. Just to summarise so far, if you're looking at a normal hybrid, it'll have hybrid written on the back. If you're looking at a plug-in, it'll say plug-in. The plug-in also has two fuel caps, whereas the full hybrid has one. And the big thing is, on the plug-in hybrid, every single model will have 19-inch wheels, whereas on the hybrid, you have to go for the Executive Plus model. And like what we saw then, the fuel cap needs to be released manually on the plug-in hybrid, and there is the electric tailgate option on the plug-in hybrid only. In terms of storage in the boot, I actually thought the plug-in would have a smaller boot, but from what I can see, and I'm only eyeballing this, I've tried to get exact numbers from the distributor, I'm still waiting, but from what I can see, there is really no difference. However, underneath the storage area, it looks like the full hybrid has a little bit more cubby holes than its plug-in hybrid counterpart, but other than that, they look really identical. So anyway, we've seen some of the visual differences on the outside. On the inside, there's very few differences, but let's have a look on the inside and a drive in the full hybrid first. And I know I keep saying it, but in this video, again, just ignore specifications. So this can be on a plug-in hybrid or a hybrid, full hybrid that is. So we're just concentrating on specific features. So this one, as a full hybrid, has a hybrid menu, and in through the hybrid menu, then it's going to give you information about what the electric motor is doing, what the battery is doing, what the engine is doing as well. And there's also further sub-menus you can go into here. And again, it's just giving you a history of how much the electric motor has been used and how much the engine has been used. And if you want to keep an eye on what way the energy flow is moving, then you can actually just have a large screen set up. You don't have to do it, but it's nice to know. Let's familiarize ourselves again. So there is some push button starts and some have keys. So we're just going to ignore that on specs for the moment. Again, we're only talking about HEV, which is hybrid electric, versus PHEV. So this one is a hybrid, full hybrid. So the engine's not running. So the green guy here tells us that we're ready to drive. So again, this is the non-plug-in version. And all I'm doing is driving along and the battery is powering the car. While we're driving, actually, one thing to keep your eye on over here, the revolution counter, because sometimes it's so quiet anyway, it's hard to know if the engine's running. Just when you see me accelerating or driving, watch this, the engine revolution counter along here. If that's not going, that means we're not using engine and we're only using the battery. In the full hybrid, the gear stick is no longer a gear stick, so it's buttons only, but this is actually the exact same in the plug-in hybrid. So really, interior wise, there's almost no distinguishing features besides the menu that we've talked about. But reverse, neutral, drive and park. However, when we do get into the full hybrid, or sorry, the plug-in hybrid, we'll see this blank and this blank actually have functions on the plug-in hybrid. The whole idea, I guess, on these full hybrids is basically they try to use the battery as much as possible. They can't use it all the time, but they're trying to complement the petrol engine. So in slow moving traffic, they will go into that EV mode as much as possible. Sometimes people used to ask, how far will this car actually go on a full electric? Not very far. I think max, if you really push it, you might get a kilometre and a half or something like that. The idea with this is it does that kind of a run and then it brings back in the petrol engine. It just continuously keeps going between the cycles. So I guess the easiest way to think about it is it's a combination sort of setup where you have your electric motor carrying it at slow speeds, but if you require power, it's going to bring back in the petrol engine. And when you're kind of cruising, it'll try and use the battery as much as possible, but it'll need the electric, use the battery as much as possible, but it'll need the engine also as well. So it'll keep cycling between them. That's the idea. The idea is it's a really good petrol engine. It's not using fuel as much as a normal petrol engine would because it has the ability to go into the battery as much as it possibly can. It's a nice car to drive, this full hybrid. It's very, very quiet, and as you see, we're gaining speed here, and very, very quickly we can see the engine revolutions have stopped, which means now the battery is carrying the car at this slow speed. But once it encounters a hill, or if I put my foot down, it'll bring back in the petrol engine, and then if we're cruising again and it requires less power, you see the way the engine revolutions have stopped, and now it's gone into a full electric mode as well. And okay, fair enough, this is at a reasonably slow speed, 40-50 kilometers an hour, but as we can see when you get out the road, it does carry on. If you're cruising at maybe a speed of 80-90 kilometers an hour, it can still do it. In this kind of case, the engine has come back on. It's keeping going in and out because it's monitoring my throttle position, and also if we're encountering little hills and things like that as well, where it has to bring back in the engine to give the battery help to get the car moving. So that's exactly what it's doing. Like what we said, it's continuously toggling between the power sources that it needs. It's really about throttle position, so I can cruise here at about 80 kilometers an hour and I don't need the petrol engine because I'm just maintaining the speed. And while I hate this phrase self-charging, essentially that's what it's doing. The battery will help while it has charge, but eventually it will deplete and the petrol engine will kick in and start recharging that battery again up to a level where it can start becoming useful again. If you're familiar with the full hybrid, in other words HEV hybrid, full hybrid electric vehicle, now we're going to have a look at the plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, PHEV, so plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. Sitting in this version, which is a Comfort Plus, so like we were saying before, I'm using this particular model because it's the only one we have. There is other models that will come with digital displays, so just ignore that. This is just showing you specific stuff for the plug-in hybrid. So the screen on the full EV we saw had a hybrid section, whereas this one here has a plug-in hybrid section. It's got a bit more detail than we saw on the full EV version. So in through here, it's giving me energy information, so how much fuel is left in the car, how much electric energy is left in the car, and how much percentage battery is left. And it's also giving us the options and telling us how long it would take to charge the car, depending which option we'd actually use. It's also given us the option to actually manage our charging as well. So there's settings in through there where you can actually set up some scheduled charging. It also gives us a history of the type of driving that we've been doing, and also telling us how much of the electric motor or the engine we've been using. And while you're driving, then you can just have an energy flow set up to tell if power is coming from the engine or from the electric motor, and just the level of battery that's left. Like we saw in the full hybrid, then you have the button set up. This is pretty much identical in terms of things like drive modes, but it's got these two buttons here. So from what I can see in the cabin, the only way, besides the menu that we just talked about up here, the only other way I know it's a plug-in hybrid is of these two options here. So this one, because it's four-wheel drive, allows you to manipulate the terrain settings. So you have snow or mud or sand, and that'll regulate how the 4-wheel drive works. Using the same button as well, then we have a drive mode, like the full hybrid that we saw already, where you can have a eco mode or a sport mode. So just to point out, what I'm saying then is the full hybrid version, you can regulate between the sport and eco version, whereas this one, because the full hybrid is 2-wheel drive, whereas this one is 4-wheel drive as a plug-in hybrid, so it's giving you extra functionality, can't seem to talk, which allows you to tell the 4-wheel drive system what kind of terrain to encounter, and then it'll basically regulate the 4-wheel drive system in the most efficient way possible, giving you the best amount of grip. The next part of the plug-in hybrid then is going to be the big part, so that's where you can select between a full electric mode or a hybrid mode. One point to note is, if you do want to go into a full EV mode, you must exit the sport mode. And then once you're back in Eco, you can toggle between an automatic mode, a hybrid mode, or a full electric mode. Toggling between the different modes is really seamless, so all you're doing is just touching the button and selecting which mode you want. If you go into the hybrid mode, it's really identical to the full hybrid we drove already. So we can cruise along using the battery only. If we put our foot down and we look for a bit of extra power, then the engine will kick in to complement the battery, and similar things like when we're encountering hills, and it's just always watching things like throttle position and stuff like that. So we can cruise along on the battery, but if we require extra power, then the engine's going to come back in and give it a hand, exact same way as it did in the full hybrid. Plug-in hybrids used to confuse me a bit, because I was always wondering, could you just treat it like a normal full hybrid like you see in our full hybrid Tucson or all the Toyotas? Yes, you could buy this car, never ever charge it, and it'll just continue on in that hybrid mode the whole time, and it'll be more efficient than a normal petrol car. However, if you're spending all the money, you want to be able to go charge the car and use the electric mode. So once you engage the electric mode, it's really seamless the way it works. You just hit the button, you're into electric mode, and that means you can accelerate and decelerate and cruise, and all in a completely electric mode. It's nice and quiet, and there's still a reasonable amount of power as well, even without the petrol engine. So your choice is, if you go with hybrid mode, that means it's going to work like the full hybrid. If you go electric, it'll be fully electric. And then there's an automatic mode. At the moment, I'm still waiting for confirmation, but I'm assuming that the automatic mode basically runs between HEV and PHEV, but it decides when the most efficient times to do it is. Like what we said though, there's more power in the PHEV version. So 261 horsepower in the PHEV versus 231 horsepower in the full hybrid version. However, the full hybrid, like you're saying, is a 2-wheel drive, and the PHEV is 4-wheel drive. Surprised when I actually looked at that acceleration that the PHEV wasn't quicker. It had 261 horsepower. In other words, it had an extra 30 horsepower. I thought it would be quicker to accelerate. It looks pretty much neck on neck for that. The only thing I will say is the 4-wheel drive plug-in hybrid puts its power down, especially in the wet, it actually puts its power down quicker, so it gets a quicker launch. However, the 2-wheel drive full hybrid weighs less because it's 2-wheel drive, so the plug-in hybrid weighs a little bit more because it's carrying the 4-wheel drive system. All in all, from 0 up as far as 100 kilometers an hour, they are absolutely identical as far as I can see. Besides, from about 0 up to 15 kilometers an hour or so on a wet day, the plug-in might have a little bit of an advantage. In terms of charging the car, you open up the charge port on the rear right hand side. You take what's called the granny cable, which comes standard with the car. One side is to plug into the car and the other side is to plug into the wall. So you plug the appropriate side into the car, then you plug the other part into the 3-pin socket, which you'll have in your house. And as an estimate, I reckon charging for 0 up as far as 100% is going to be in the region of about 15 hours to go from 0 all the way to 100%. Once you're finished, plug it out from the socket, plug it out from the car, and then basically just put it back in. There's also an option of buying a 7 kilowatt cable, which basically means you can go into a faster charger setup. It works in the exact same way, but one side is plugged into obviously the faster charger, and that will usually charge the car fully in about 3 hours or so. And when you're finished then, just plug it back out, and make sure sometimes if you go to plug it out and it won't come out, unlock the car, and that then allows you to actually take the plug out. One point to note here is the 7 kilowatt cable. I believe these plug-in hybrids do not charge at 7 kilowatts. Well, actually, I know they don't. So, for example, when we plug it in, even on that faster charge that we have, which is still not a fast charger that you'd see in a petrol station or something, but it'd be quicker than the 3-pin plug. It looks like it's charging at about 5.9 kilowatt hours. So I'm getting mixed reports. Some people are saying that even mightn't be accurate. It might only be charging at 3 to 4 kilowatt hours. I can't be 100% sure. The only thing I can give you is it's charging for us in approximately 3 hours from 0 to full. In In terms of how far you can drive, well, they're quoting 61 kilometers as the range. Realistically speaking, I think by the time you turn the heating on and use the lights and accelerate and just be a general not very good driver, I think you're going to end up somewhere in the region of about 40 kilometers as a realistic range. We've managed to do 55 on that one, but to be fair, you know, it's a decent time of year, the heater's not on that much. But I think if you think about 40 kilometers and driving normally without, you know, trying to be conservative, that's very realistic. Hopefully now you're starting to get a better idea of the physical differences between the car and some of the features, but I suppose for a lot of people watching this video, they want to know kind of conclusively which is the better buy. So we're going to make a couple of assumptions when we're doing this comparison. The first assumption I'm going to make is on the full hybrid car that it's going to average somewhere in the region of about 6 to 7 litres per 100 kilometres. I'm going to call it around 6.5 litres per 100 kilometres. I've seen people do into the 5s and I've seen people up into the 7s. So I'm making the assumption around 6.5 as a median number. That means, so looking at the current fuel price on cars of nearly 150, if you put 10 euros of unleaded in the car and we're making an assumption of 6.5 litres per every 100 kilometres travelled, it's going to cost you about 10 euros to travel about 100 kilometres. The assumptions I'm going to make on the PHEV then are, it's quoting a range of 61 kilometres. I'm saying it's around 40, but let's give it some credibility and say that if you're, you know, frugal and you try your best, you could average up to about 50 kilometres for a full charge. At this point, I'm still a little bit careful about telling people how much electricity costs because there's so many variables. But from the research I've done on various models, the feedback seems to be approximately €1.50 to charge a battery that's in or around 13 to 14 kilowatt hours, like what we have in the plug-in hybrid Tucson. Okay, so then let's do a comparison. So think about it this way. If it costs about 10 euros to do 100 kilometres in the full hybrid, that means 50 kilometres is going to be €5. In the same vein, we are comparing that with doing 50 kilometres on the plug-in hybrid costing €1.50. So in other words, there's approximately a €3.50 saving over a 50 kilometre range. So how do you make your decision? It depends how far you travel. So think about it this way. If you are somebody that covers, say, 50 kilometres at least per day, then you're going to get some benefit out of this. So that means you're saving €3.50 per day. That means if you travelled every single day 50 kilometres, which a lot of people don't, but let's make the assumption you do 7 days a week, 365 days of the year, that means over a year, you'll have saved about €1,300 on fuel overall. So in other words, you will have consumed €1,300 less of fuel and electricity. So the saving is €1,300 for the plug-in hybrid compared to the full hybrid. You'll have saved about €1,300. At the moment, as we make the video, there's about a €2,000 gap between them. So in less than 2 years, you will break even. The way you're making your decision then is just trying to calculate a difference between the cost of the vehicles. So at the time of the video, there's about a €2,000 gap. In other words, the plug-in hybrid is about €2,000 more than its full hybrid counterpart. Which means in less than 2 years, if you're saving €1,300 per year, that means less than 2 years, you'll have broken even and now you're saving money. However, there is going to be some changes to the grant system in Ireland, so that won't be consistent. Depending on the time of watching the video, if you want to be more accurate, give us a shout, 086 843 1945, and I'll be able to tell you the price differences at that point you're inquiring. Anyway, hopefully the video has been useful and hopefully it's given you a better insight into the differences between buying the full hybrid and the plug-in hybrid. If there's any information you want, Brian is my name, 086 843 1945. Give me a shout. Thanks for taking time to watch.